The White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce and On Location TV 19 are proud to present Your Business Matters, dedicated to your business needs. The White Bear Area Chamber is a nonprofit business organization serving as an advocate for the White Bear area and its business community. Now here is the Executive Director of the White Bear Area Chamber and the host of Your Business Matters, Tom Snell.
Welcome to the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce program, Your Business Matters. And today I'm really pleased to have with us as our guest Jason Moeckel from the Department of Natural Resources, and he is a division manager in the area of ecological water resources. And thank you very much for joining us today at our program.
Pleasure to be here, thank you.
And there's a lot of issues related to our water resources in our area. And the first question that I want to ask you, Jason, is what is the Department of Natural Resources?
It's a great question. We cover a lot at the DNR. We have forestry, we have mining and mineral issues, water resources, fisheries and wildlife management, parks and trails. It's a far-ranging, fairly large organization, many different issues around the state.
Okay, that's interesting. Now, I know that one of the things that has come up in our area and that has a direct relationship with the Department of Natural Resources is that I understand the legislature enacted a law giving the Department of Natural Resources the opportunity to put together what they call water management areas. Is that correct?
Yeah, Tom, so what it is that the legislation came in 2010.
Okay.
And what it authorizes is for the commissioner to designate a groundwater management area.
Okay.
And the groundwater is the key addition there. And simply, we haven't done it before in the state of Minnesota. It's relatively new. But we are working on and proposing to do that here in the north and east part of the Twin Cities metropolitan area, two other areas in the state, to comprehensively look at our water supply, how we're meeting our water needs, and managing those resources sustainably. And that's what that statute really says, is we've got to do it sustainably, and it lays out some criteria.
Okay, now are there other states in the country that you know of that have established groundwater management areas, or is this a first in the nation?
You know, it's not a first in the nation, but if you look around the country, there's different ways of managing water. There's different rights. There's in the western United States, it's called prior appropriation. So if you have a water right, as long as you use that right, you get to keep it. On the eastern half of the state, we have what's called riparian law, which means that everybody has access and some right to water. It's just a matter of how much. Well, how they go about managing that, how they organize the political environment around it varies depending on where you are. But you go to different parts of the country, they're struggling with how do we manage our aquifers sustainably, and they generally designate some area that they're going to try to manage that.
Okay, all right. Now in Minnesota again, and particularly I want to focus on the northeast quadrant of the Twin Cities because that's where White Bear Lake is in the surrounding suburban area, and I think your water management area will take in those various communities. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. What we're looking at for the groundwater management area in the north and east. And let me preface this by saying we began discussions this summer with Washington County and other local units of government to hear what they thought was important as we were looking at this issue.
So this isn't just Ramsey County then?
It's not just Ramsey County.
Okay.
It's going to encompass almost all of Washington County, parts of Ramsey County, parts of Anoka County.
Oh, even Anoka County.
Parts of Anoka County. And the key here is, what we're talking about is groundwater management. Groundwater resides in aquifers. These are geologic materials that are underneath us, right? It's out of sight, out of mind. We don't see it. But the key here is to manage that, we've got to manage it in some sort of a unit that makes sense. Well, the Mississippi River and the St. Croix River provide the boundaries, what we call hydrologic boundaries for groundwater, at least for some of the aquifers here. So it made sense when we looked at that to include the whole area of the Prairie du Chien Jordan bounded by those
and
rivers.
That's the big aquifer, right? The Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer. That is what people would look at as the major a groundwater source in this area.
Right. It's what we refer to as the workhorse aquifer. It's the closest aquifer that we get to that has really good water quality.
And that's what people use in this area, right? They don't use water from the Mississippi River like in White Bear or the other areas. They use water then from the aquifer typically. Is that correct?
Well, it's a mixture. So St. Paul and some of its surrounding communities, they actually use quite a bit of Mississippi River water.
Okay.
But as the Twin Cities grew, so we started off Minneapolis and St. Paul, they're using the river.
Yeah.
But as we've grown over time, since the 70s particularly, the suburbs have grown, and they've been relying on these aquifers to meet their water supply needs.
So more as the communities grow out, as we have more population, as they grow further away from the hub cities, we use more water out of the ground than out of the river.
That's right. So our growth, our expansion has been largely supported by groundwater to meet those needs.
Okay. Now, I guess that would lead me to my next question is Minnesota is looked at as a land where we have an abundance of water resources. We're the land of 10,000 lakes. One of the things that sets Minnesota apart from states like Arizona or California is that we have this abundance of water. Is moving forward, is this water issue going to be a concern for people in Minnesota, do you think, as we continue to grow?
Yeah, it is. But the way we have to look at it is we have a lot of water, right?
Okay.
The challenge is, how do we manage it? We've got a lot of groundwater here in the Twin Cities too. But the real issue is when we pull that groundwater out of the ground, that we're diverting it from wherever it might have been flowing to. You know, groundwater's moving slowly, but it's moving. And a lot of times it shows up in a trout stream. It's reflected in lake levels or the wetlands, that sort of thing, or springs along our bluffs. And you know, the Twin Cities, we've got an abundance of it, but the challenge is if we overuse it, then it no longer flows to those places in the same ways. So what we have to look at is, how do we rebalance the supply, if you will? We've got a lot of water moving through the Twin Cities that's flowing in these rivers, Minneapolis, through Minneapolis with the Mississippi and the St. Croix and the Minnesota. And we don't use a lot of that water, but it seems that we could use more of those waters and not have effect on the rivers.
Are there a lot of parts of the country that would use surface water instead of groundwater?
Certainly, and we do. I mean, and if you look at, let's say California as an example, they use a lot of river water runoff that they capture through reservoirs and then pipe through aqueducts and other systems that they distribute water around the state to do that. They also rely on groundwater, and what they do in some parts of the country is take surface water and purposely try to get it to recharge groundwater, and then they use the groundwater to meet their water supply need. Groundwater is in some ways like a reservoir. It provides a buffer so that, you know, if it's really dry, if you go through months of very little rain, your rivers tend to have less water, but your groundwater can still be pretty strong.
So what is going to happen if you peer into the future, and I know that there are plans right now for areas around Hugo and Lionel Lakes, for example. There's growth projections of maybe 30,000 additional residents. You've got this area is booming. You've got new businesses moving in. If you look at that in the future, can you say anything about what type of process or management that we might be taking a look at?
Well, I think the key here is that what we're trying to do with the groundwater management area is bring some predictability to how we're going to deal with water going forward. If you're a growing community and you're investing in your water supply infrastructure, it's really important to you to know how reliable groundwater might be or some other source. Right? So we're trying to bring some predictability to this by saying, here's how much water we think we can sustainably use by pulling it out of the ground. And when we know what that is, and then if communities say, well, we are going to need more than that because of our population growth or our businesses or industries that are here, then you say, well, how do we close that gap? So the difference between what you can pull out of the ground and what you're going to need presents itself as a gap.
Are there any innovative things that communities around here have done, short of like bringing water in from the Mississippi, that help conserve water?
Right. So there's a few examples. One of the things that we're seeing is taking water that falls on parking lots, roads, capturing that water, treating it, and then using it for irrigation at a golf course.
That makes a lot of sense. Has that been done?
Yeah, down in Woodbury. In fact, it was a project that was supported with the Clean Water Land and Legacy funds, the amendment that passed 5 years ago. There's other things that folks are doing, which is to, rather than have that water run off of our driveways and impervious surfaces, actually clean it up a little bit and then get it back into the ground. We call that recharge. That's what supports the groundwater. So by just valuing the water and trying to keep it where it falls, we can solve a lot of these kinds of issues about how much water we have and how much we need.
Now, you know, another real interesting question that maybe you can help on a little bit is, I understand that individuals, through action or through voluntary support, can conserve a certain percentage of water, and I've heard up to like 20-30% without changing one's lifestyle. Are you familiar with any of the things that citizens can do to conserve their water?
Sure. I mean, you could talk about a range of things that you can do. One of the sort of easiest fixes is to look at the fixtures in your home. You know, if you've got an older home, you might have a toilet that's flushing multiple gallons every time you're hitting the button. You know, the new ones that are out now, they're like 1.1 gallon per flush.
Oh, okay.
You know, shower heads, those kinds of things. You know, you can make those kind of changes and reduce your overall consumption. But one of the things we have to look at in terms of our use here, our water use, is that we're using a lot more water per person, per year, or per day than a lot of the rest of the country. So we could certainly make some changes, and there seem to be getting by just fine by using less water in other places, right? So it's, examine our own habits, if you will, in that regard. We can look at what we're doing in terms of our lawn maintenance, lawn care.
Exactly, yeah.
You know, I mean, there's things like, sometimes maybe there's some overwatering that goes on, or maybe you cut back on the amount of lawn that you have, therefore you reduce the amount of summer needs.
I know I was driving to work one day and it was pouring rain, and I counted 6 homes that had their automatic sprinklers on.
Right. So moisture sensors can help you with that if you don't want to be managing it. The other thing would be, you see these a lot now, these rain barrels, right? So you've got your downspout, you catch the water in your rain barrel, and then you use that for some of your landscaping. I've got a few of those at my place. I use them for my garden and that sort of thing.
Now, the other point I want to ask, and going back a little bit to how communities look at water, one suggestion that I've heard is that this potential issue isn't a big deal because we'll just drill into the lower aquifer because there's a lot of water resources if you go down further. How would you respond to that issue?
Well, we do have a lot of aquifers. There's multiple aquifers under the Twin Cities, and certainly some of those are, particularly in this part of the metro, there's several there that can supply water. But if these aquifers are connected, right?
Okay.
So they leak. So just because you go to a deeper one doesn't mean you've gotten away from the overall issue or concern about overusing that. So it's not just simply a matter of drill, baby, drill, or drill deeper. We've got to look at that and evaluate what the options are. But that's why I say, there's other things like surface water. There's offsetting groundwater needs through conservation, wise use. There's using stormwater. There's reuse technology. The Met Council has a facility. They treat water to drinking water standards out of one of their waste treatment facilities up in East Bethel. And they've got it set up so that it could supply some businesses and other needs. The demand isn't there yet, but it's a growing area. Right now, they're putting it out into some sandy soil and just letting it go into the ground. So they're recharging groundwater. There's lots of those kinds of innovations that we can start to explore in the Twin Cities to help meet our needs, to close that gap.
Yep. And so, I mean, that is really what the Met Council is going to be looking at then, is going to the different communities and working with them collaboratively to find solutions so that they can meet their future water needs and also look at the future needs of our community.
Yeah, and Met Council's role is they deal with the water supply, the master water supply plan.
Yep.
At DNR, we review each community's water supply plan because they get a permit from us to pump the water. And it's up to us to say, here's how much you can sustainably use. It's not going to affect water quality or surface waters, other users, that sort of thing.
Yep.
And then Met Council can help with the overall planning and approach to the Twin Cities water supply needs.
Okay. What I'd like to ask you next is kind of an ending question. And that has to deal with, again, Minnesota, and we still are a state with abundant water supply. I think we can agree with that. Do you think if we are able to come to a rational solution to these issues that we're facing as far as effective use of water in our communities, that Minnesota could be a star in our nation as far as a state with rich water resources that will prove to be really valuable in the future?
Absolutely. You know, compared to other places where, I mean, the reality is, you said, we do have a lot of water here, so we're not trying to squeeze blood out of the turnip, so to speak. We have options. We have to figure out how to use it more effectively, more wisely. I think the simplest way for us to think about this is that right now, for the most part, we use water once. It comes into our home, we use it for one purpose, it goes down a drain, it gets treated by the Met Council's treatment facilities. I'm talking about in the Twin Cities. And then it gets into the Mississippi River. If we can figure out how to have that water just serve one more purpose, one more use before we send it on its way, then we can dramatically change the water management landscape right here in the Twin Cities.
And be done without really a lot of pressure or problems with the user.
That's right. I mean, we don't need drinking water for all of our water needs out here. There's lots of things that we can use non-drinking water for, water that, you know, doesn't have to come out of the tap. But, you know, we've built our entire infrastructure on the idea that we're just going to use the same water for everything. And the rest of the country, and particularly in the drier parts, they're figuring out how to reuse water, and many times over.
And we have to learn to do some of the same things. So
That's right.
If people are interested in finding out more about this issue from the standpoint of the DNR, who should they contact, and what would be the best method for going about it?
That's a great question. We've got some information up on our website about these groundwater management areas now, so you can go to the DNR's website, and then there's pages you can search on groundwater, and you can certainly call me or any of our project managers for these groundwater management areas.
And if somebody wants to call you, what's your phone number?
651-259-5240.
Well, thank you very much for coming and talking to us for the White Bear Area Chamber of Commerce program, Your Business Matters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom.
You've been watching Your Business Matters. For more information on this program or the White Bear Area Chamber, visit www.whitebearchamber.com or call 651-429-8593.